Welcome, listeners worldwide, to this Naxos live Q&A with the cellist Gabriel Schwabe and the pianist Roland Pöntinen. We are so happy to bring you this interview around the release of Russian Ballads, a recent recording of music for cello and piano, featuring the music of Prokofiev and Yevgeny Kissin, and Shostakovich, whose cello sonata we just heard the final minutes of as the introduction to this live stream. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, welcome from wherever in the world you are. If you leave a comment on YouTube, we will be able to read it and potentially ask these two a question later. So please feel free to participate in that way. Until then, we'll be interweaving conversation between the three of us with clips from the album, which, after some delay, was released just last month. So, Gabriel, Roland, congratulations on the album, and thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. All right, so we'll sort of ask some questions for the both of you later, but Gabriel, I would like to start with you today. This is your 7th album with Naxos. It's your 4th to be co-produced by Radio Bremen, which is a relatively small German public radio station. And then Naxos, of course, is a very large global record label. How did your collaborations with these two institutions come about, and how did that lead to the creation of this album?
Oh, well, that, of course, is a long story to tell everything. But I am so happy about this being already the 7th release. I wasn't aware for Naxos, because the collaboration has just been wonderful, and there were so many projects realized that really were very close to my heart. And Bremen, I think, is a special place to record. I hope that Roland would agree, because there is just a fantastic acoustics, first of all, but everything else, there's a wonderful team of people who took care of us, a very good piano, and so everything comes together to create the circumstances that you need to feel at ease and free in a recording session, because you don't want to be worrying about any of these things. So that is why I kept coming back and prolonging the collaboration with them. The inception, I think, of the whole project came also through Naxos of Sweden, in that case, who brought Roland and me together for the first time, which was sort of a chance meeting, but it turned out to be a wonderful one, because we were playing just a short piece together at a CD presentation. But somehow, maybe Roland will tell a very different story, but for me at least, I thought there was something that clicked, and we just there was some wonderful chemistry, apart of course, the fantastic playing. But I really felt that I wanted to continue that, and then we thought about this repertoire together, and planned it in this way. And Kissin also came into the mix a bit by chance, because it happened to be released. The music for this piece around the time that we were talking about this program, and it just made sense to include it. And I think we do like the piece and enjoyed discovering it, especially since it's an unwritten piece of paper, so to speak. It hasn't been played much, and that gives you a certain freedom also to explore, which is very nice.
Sure. No, that's the joy of new music, right? So Roland, let's bounce off that and hear your side of things. You have appeared on over 100 recordings, whether as a soloist, a collaborative artist, a composer. You have a label of your own, Haddock. So how did you sort of find your way into this larger project with Gabriel? And do you feel as well acclimated to recording as your discography would suggest?
Well, I have quite a few hours of recording sessions behind me, of course, and a certain amount of routine. So I enjoy to make records. Actually, it's a very special process. It has nothing to do with the live concert, of course, which is very important to stress, I think. And also the thing Gabriel said is I cannot agree more. It was kind of a coincidence that we met, like he said, in Stockholm, and he just needed someone for a very short performance. And it was one of those moments. Well, I've been playing with many musicians and had many collaborations with different type of musicians, but with Gabriel was that kind of more or less unique situation where you actually don't have so much to talk about or explain or rehearse. Actually, it's well, we take one piece, okay, let's have next piece, and more or less it's adjusting itself by listening to each other, which is the ideal situation for two chamber musicians. So I was very happy from the very start, from the very minute we tried the first piece, and it's been like that since. And also, so I was very happy to have this opportunity to do this recording with this very, for me, very dear repertoire, very attractive pieces. It's really chamber music at its best, I must say. And also, of course, the venue, which is the classical Bremen studio, which I heard so much about. This was my very first encounter with that venue, but everything I heard about it was true. It's fantastic acoustic and a very nice atmosphere altogether. So I was very happy about the whole project.
Yeah. So from that felicitous meeting to just play one short piece of music, you two have developed quite the portfolio together. And let's now, for the listeners out there, hear a little bit more of that music. So earlier we heard the fourth movement of the Shostakovich cello sonata, right at the start of this Naxos Live Q&A. Let's dive a little bit deeper into that. We actually do have a promotional clip that's also available on YouTube of you two playing a bit of the second movement of the cello sonata. So let's now hear a little bit more of Gabriel Schwabe and Roland Pöntinen playing together in Shostakovich. All right. Far too brief an excerpt, right? I wish we could listen to the entire thing during this broadcast, but if you're just joining us on this Naxos Live Q&A, welcome. A reminder, if you're on Facebook or YouTube, you can leave a comment or a question for these incredible performers, Gabriel Schwabe, the cellist, and Roland Pöntinen, the pianist. We already have some comments from Retropolis, who is very excited to be here, and from Sal, who says hello from Cologne, Germany. So, thank you so much for the music, you two. I love those harmonic glissandi that you do for too brief a moment there, Gabriel.
Yeah, you know that video brings up a lot of memories because everything around this recording, including this excerpt from the concert you saw, had a lot of difficulties, of course, because of the pandemic, because we had to, in this case for the concert, I had to travel to Sweden, and then Roland had to travel to Germany, and neither of these travel arrangements were very certain until the last minute whether we would actually be able to travel and do this project. So very glad everything worked out, but I remember the anxiety in the days before to know if it would really work out. But even is something even especially rewarding when you do get to play them afterwards, I feel.
Oh, I'm sure. Here where I am in the United States, I'm looking forward to going to a concert on Sunday where there were visa problems and problems with coronavirus involving a Dutch conductor and flute player who's going to be here in town. And, you know, I think they didn't figure it out until very close to the concert. So we're very glad, obviously, that you two could play together live and to record in Bremen. Right. So, Gabriel, you've released albums almost annually since 2015, and as live performance is becoming a bit more routine again, despite those ongoing difficulties, are you happy to have struck what seems like a very productive balance for you between studio time and time performing live on stage?
Yes, I think they go hand in hand, even though I would 100% agree with what Roland said earlier, that one is not the other and cannot replace the other also. So I think it's very important that we now are coming back to being able to perform in front of a live audience, because you know there's just no substitute for that communion that you have with the audience. And then I think the recording fills a different part of the puzzle, so to speak. And it's wonderful to realize these projects, because at the end of the day, it's not only that there is a CD that you can put on display somewhere, but so much goes into it, so much thought, rehearsing, and really looking for what you want to say on that recording in this specific music that you're doing. And I do feel that there is a certain extra amount of depth when you prepare a recording. Not that one is shallow with the concerts, but you know that it's going to be there, maybe not forever, but for a reasonably long time. And you want to make sure that you really convey your vision of the piece. So I think you even learn a lot about the pieces that you maybe can't otherwise. So
right. Thank you. Roland, would you like to respond and share some of your thoughts and feelings about live performance after this past couple of difficult years?
Yes. What I noticed, or I had small, what I already maybe suspected before, was that music became even more important somehow during this very challenging time. And I know my family, they said, well, there was nothing to practice well to prepare in a sense, since all the concerts were either cancelled or postponed or whatever. But my family noticed that I never practiced as much as under the pandemic. And suddenly I found myself with only myself and the piano and the whole piano literature, which is, and some more oceans of time, maybe. And for me, it was a very joyous experience to be very in contemplation, really digging a bit deeper in the whole repertoire for me. So for me, it was actually without trying to be any cynical in a way, but it was really a fruitful time for me personally. Of course, I longed all the for the moment when we're going to be able to play for a live audience again. Even 10 people was a big difference from just playing a streamed concert, for example. So just to have somebody in the room listening to what you are doing, because this kind of communication needs it needs a venue, it needs a hall, it needs listeners that are really there. So it was there were negative things, but also many positive things. And now we really look forward to having more concerts for a live audience, of course, like everyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I'm looking forward to hearing more live concerts now, and maybe one or both of you sometime soon, if I can swing it. So let's talk a little bit more about the music on this record, right, which is so invested in the Russian repertoire. So much of the album's overall runtime is dedicated to music by Shostakovich and Prokofiev, both of whom are known and beloved for some very reflective and sort of slower music, but also very high energy playing and very demanding passages. So we have another clip ready. So let's now hear the end of Prokofiev's C major sonata, Opus 119. This is just going to be a couple of minutes of your performance of this piece, but I think it reveals a lot about the sheer amount of energy and technical sort of wherewithal it takes to perform this music. So a little bit of Prokofiev. It's wonderful to have such a conclusive, high-energy ending. For those who may just be joining partway through our Naxos live Q&A, we are here across 2 continents with cellist Gabriel Schwabe and pianist Roland Pöntinen, talking about the album Russian Ballads, which includes this recording of the C major sonata, Opus 119, by Sergei Prokofiev, the Soviet composer who was, of course, born in Ukraine. I'll ask this next question to both of you because it applies equally to both of you. When both partners in sort of 2-person chamber music like this have very demanding parts, and both of you are really trying to keep pace and express yourselves through all of the technical challenges, what qualities do you value in a collaborator?
Do you want to start?
Quality, yes. I think the listening to listen to each other, it's very crucial thing. Of course, in like the ending of this sonata, for example, first Prokofiev is, as always, very witty and it's a lot of humor, but then towards the end it becomes almost like a big organ music in the piano, and also the cello is extending its dynamic range to the absolute maximum. And of course, we all want a piece of that cake, the piano and the cellist. So you have to, there must be some kind of compromise. Otherwise, the piano will absolutely kill the cello. Because playing double stops isn't making it easier, actually. It would be maybe more efficient to have only single notes for the or octaves or something, but to play sixths like you do. So there is a inbuilt dynamical problem in this ending. You want it to have it as powerful as possible from the piano without destroying you, the cellist. You must be heard. So what I tend to like is that you have, there is no absolute dynamics, but you work with different layers. So I'm shaping my chords differently, taking emphasis some of the notes that don't compete with the cello and so on. So there's a lot of listening and maybe a bit adjusting before you get this kind of togetherness and an added extra dynamic. 1 + 1 makes 3 or something, you know. That's what I have to say. But
Sure.
It's not that easy to make sound really powerful. I don't know what.
And that is, and that is, I mean, to me, that is fascinating. You know how you do that with so many notes, and it's really a rare quality because the danger is, as you say, either the piano completely destroys the cello, or the pianist takes back and then it sounds weak, and you don't want either of that. So so that, I think, it's a very, very important quality. And then again, I think when you really try to tune into each other without one trying, because often it happens maybe that you encounter a musician who is a fantastic musician, but then feels the need to explain the music to you. And that never happens with us. We usually, I think it's very rarely that we speak at all, actually.
No. Yes.
Very minute things maybe, but everything else is just opening the ears and tuning into the other's playing. And and that you can't, I think that is something you can't really achieve, no matter how much you rehearse. Either there is a certain chemistry there, or you have to, try to bridge the lack thereof by other means, but that is not ideal, of course.
And of course, you have the copy, you have the music, you know what's written also in the music, and if you can reach the same kind of conclusion what the music is all about. I mean, this particular piece, what does Prokofiev want to convey with these notes, And if of course you can discuss it, but in a way it's much better to play like we do. We play and listen, and many times I noticed working with Gabriel that you actually maybe you want to repeat a section, or maybe something is not really perfectly together, or something is otherwise you want to change something. But many times when we rehearsed, we just took that place again without explaining why.
Exactly.
And
yes.
Immediately everything was just fell on its right place without us we didn't need to explain anything verbally. So that's a very nice quality in our collaboration, I must say.
Yes, yeah. And it saves a lot of time also.
It does, yeah. So we have more time for having a coffee instead.
Exactly.
Sure. Yeah, you can talk over the coffee, and then
yes, that's
you don't have to talk during the rehearsal, right? No, that sort of nonverbal communication is so important, and to some extent it can happen in rehearsals for a live performance, but there's so much space for it, right? For that sort of testing out of things, restarting when you're in the studio. It affords that space for you, I think.
Right.
And also there's so much you can learn from your former recordings and the whole situation every time with the studio. It's you go into to play a piece, and you maybe play it once or twice, and you go to the listening room and listen to what you just recorded. And I remember Rubinstein saying there was a clip with him recording one of his records, and he always said, "Well, now I will take my lesson," meaning that he went to the listening room, and everything was like learning all the time. He was learning something. He was learning something also from the finished record, the finished result, that he could benefit before next recording. So there's always, and I think also with recordings, it could be a bit dangerous to think that this is the definite answer, or this is what I'm going to present for eternity, or whatever. I think the more healthy approach is to say that recording, this is where I am right now. And after a few years, you look back on it, and then you probably will notice that some things, maybe not all, but some things have changed anyway. And then you must realize that this recording was a document about that particular moment, this particular year, and that situation in your life and in your playing.
Yeah, and when you realize that also frees you to take risks in the recording session, which is so important. I think it can be dangerous, especially going, gathering that experience for the first times, to think, oh, there is a microphone now, and now I have to really play everything perfectly. But then that, of course, kills the music. So it really, one should rather embrace the fact that you can redo it. If you're not happy, you can do it another time, 3 times maybe, and use that to really go all in terms of the expression.
Yeah, we have all these different words that we use when we talk about music making, right? Lessons, classes, rehearsals, recording sessions, listening sessions. But, to some extent, if you're really listening and really trying to learn all the time, like you're saying, Roland, the activities are not so easy to separate out. We use different words, but a bit of learning, a bit of listening can be happening anytime we engage with music. Yeah, you two are, of course, very well experienced in engaging with music all the time throughout your lives. So speaking of reinterpreting music or interpreting music for the first time, this is the world's premiere recording of Yevgeny Kissin's Sonata for Cello and Piano, which is his Opus 2, right? People know Kissin for his career as a pianist, but he is also a composer, an increasingly active one. So we have a clip of this contemporary piece by Kissin, which, Gabriel, I think you've played live before recording it. Am I right in thinking so?
Well, yes, both of us. We performed it, in this concert in Sweden.
Yeah.
Before the recording. Yes, and we've performed it since, because it wasn't so easy to be performing just before our recording session, which was in the middle of everything being locked down. But yes, I think it's a wonderful piece of music, and somehow every time we play it, there's a new aspect. You get a different feel for, especially for how to shape the arches, because it's sonata in one movement. It's not very long in that sense, but you really have to know how to shape the tension. So, and that comes out a little differently every time, and it's very nice.
Sure. It's this one movement sonata that's around 10 minutes long, I think, in total. And so for the benefit of the listeners, let's now hear a little bit of Kissin's cello sonata. This is going to be the last 1/3, I think, of the piece in the rendition by you two on the album. All right, so for those who are just joining us, just past the halfway point of this Naxos Live Q&A, we are here with Gabriel Schwabe and Roland Pöntinen talking about their performances on this new album out recently from Naxos called Russian Ballads, in which they play music of Shostakovich and Prokofiev, 20th century music, but also this newer music that we've just been hearing by the pianist and more recently composer Yevgeny Kissin. So I always think of Mahler's Seventh Symphony every time I hear that little motto that begins the piece and then that he returns to at the end. Gabriel, have you ever felt an urge to compose as a musician who's constantly playing music by other composers? And if not, are there composers out there right now whose music you follow and admire?
Well, I mean, I have had the impulse, of course, over the years. I don't think that is particularly my strong suit. So at the same time, I never formally studied composition. So yes, I mean, I scribbled a few things, but nothing that I think should be brought to a larger audience. But I think it does tell you when you try, or even when it's about composing a cadenza, for example, that is something that is a bit more in my day-to-day life. It's of course it's a bit different in the sense that you take material that is already there and then elaborate on that. What I really find difficult is the inception of the idea to come up with a motive that warrants exploration. So that I find fascinating in any music, actually, whether it's contemporary or older. And I think that type of composing is something that I find very attractive. To take, let's say, a motive, yeah, and expand on that, and then really build from things that are already ingrained in what you started with. Because of course, in contemporary music, there's all sorts of composing, which is can also be very effective. But I think that in a sense traditional building of a tension arch that I find very, very attractive.
Sure. And Roland, you are a well-regarded composer as well as a pianist. So I wonder, during the recording sessions, during preparation for a live performance even, do you find yourself sort of slipping between the composer frame of mind and the performer frame of mind? Are they both always going at the same time? How do you sort of reconcile those two sort of musical modes in your own artistic life?
Well, first of all, I don't really consider myself as a full-time composer. I've been writing music on command, so to speak. Many friends of mine have asked, "Can you write a piece?" And then I have a reason to do it. It all started, of course, very early when I was 7-8 years. I started to scribble down thoughts or some results of mainly improvisations, maybe at the piano. And then later on, I did my first small attempts of writing something. In high school, I had a jazz group, and we actually only performed my music. So it was saxophones and strings and so on. But then, of course, I really tried to do serious composing. The first collaboration was with the trombonist Christian Lindberg. I did several pieces for him, both with trombone strings and trombone piano. I'm a bit more reluctant to do piano music as such, because there's, I mean, there you go into really crowded field of fantastic things. So I'm a bit afraid of doing pure piano music. I've done some small pieces. Actually, not very much for cello. I did a trio or a quartet with a clarinet, cello, violin, piano some years ago. And
well, now that I know that you write on request, maybe you got yourself in trouble.
No, well, as I said, I'm not a composer. I'm a pianist that writes occasionally some music because of my own enjoyment mostly, and mostly I actually do arrangement works, a lot of arrangements.
Yeah. All right. Well, maybe something will come of this live Q&A musically. In addition to folks learning about the background of this recording project. And I will remind listeners on Facebook, YouTube, however you're finding this, if you make a comment on the usually right-hand side as you're watching, we will be able to see that comment in the little environment we have here and respond to it. So feel free to pitch questions our way, everyone. Thank you so much to both of you for all of your time so far. Roland, you just mentioned that you wrote a quartet for piano, clarinet, violin, and cello, right? Yeah, it's the same instrumentation as the Messiaen Quartet for the End of Time. And
Exactly.
yeah, Messiaen was obviously writing in very difficult circumstances, right, during the Second World War, and Prokofiev was writing under difficult circumstances as well, living in the Soviet Union toward the end of his life. So the cello sonata, which I'm circling back to because it's such a powerful piece, and your recording of it is so brimming with different moods and sort of thoughts that it inspires. It was written for Mstislav Rostropovich and Sviatoslav Richter, and there's so much energy and light and almost joy in the reading that you two offer us on this album. There is also darkness in it, right? And we know from reading history that he wrote it under censorship and his health was failing at the time. So this rendition on the album seems to strain heavenward. And I'd like to have the audience listen to a little bit of that now. So this is around, a couple of minutes into the start of the Prokofiev Cello Sonata, Opus 119. This is the opening Andante Grave, and there's this interplay, right, from the beginning of the piece. And there's this interplay of light and dark that we hear. So here's some Prokofiev. Such a beautiful recording. All right, so if you are just joining us, welcome again to the Naxos live Q&A with Gabriel Schwabe and Roland Pöntinen, talking about the album Russian Ballads. That was just a little bit of the very beginning of this cello sonata by Prokofiev from a very difficult time in his life and in the world around him. So how did it feel to sort of experience that alternation of joy and sort of darkness in this music as you were struggling to find recording time amid the pandemic, as the world was, experiencing all sorts of difficulties? Did you feel that tension?
Well, I think, that's what makes music great, is that it's able to transcend all of these things. I do think that there's a certain sense of gratitude when you finally get to do the project that you set out to do amidst these adverse circumstances. But the music making itself, I'd like to think that it's unaffected because it comes from the music rather than whatever is may be troubling us at that particular moment. So,
Roland, you have.
I agree with that, absolutely. And of course, you can always find different things to expose in the music also, and you can emphasize certain moods and colors and so on. And but speaking about this sonata, it's so rich. It's so very rich. As always, Prokofiev has this melodic invention that is absolutely genius. He always seems to find the right atmosphere to, and all he creates. What he creates is always fantastic. So I think this. It's all in the music, like Gabriel said. It's a play with light and shade, which is very obvious in this start of this sonata. It starts very solemnly, a bit dark, but somehow it opens up after only 1 or 2 minutes. So it's I always love this sonata. It's so fantastic, and it's so extremely lyrical. In every sense, I should say, and also humorous, like the second movement, for example. But it's very typical also of Prokofiev's late style, which was very melodic and very almost serene in a way. I mean, if you compare with his very early stuff, that's much more tough and sarcastic and so on. There is no sarcasm in this music. It's really a very dark kind of beauty also.
And what I love about this beginning particularly is I think there's this true sense of storytelling. You're embarking on a long journey. You don't know exactly what is ahead as a listener, but you know that it's going to be interesting and exciting. And this first gesture in the cello, to me, always is like saying "once upon a time," and then starts to tell the story. So it's very special in that sense.
Yeah. Well, we are getting some comments. No questions yet from the audience, but I am still holding out hope. Raymond in probably the United States or Canada, says thank you for the live stream, and he's hoping to hear you two on this side of the Atlantic, meaning North America, someday. I hope so too, as someone who lives in the US. So, Gabriel, you just mentioned how the opening gesture in the cello in the sonata by Prokofiev, it sort of feels like sort of a narrator beginning to tell a story. And of course, the album is named Russian Ballads partly because of this ballad in C minor that Prokofiev also wrote earlier in his career. And this too is sort of it's so suggestive of storytelling, right? And ballades come out of this poetic tradition. I personally, and I know this varies depending where you live, what sorts of concerts you're going to, I personally have not heard this repertoire nearly enough in my lifetime yet. I haven't heard the sonata as much live. I haven't heard the ballad live ever. And the same for the sonata for solo cello, which is available as a digital bonus track when you purchase this album. So the recordings are stunning, of course, in this wonderful room in Bremen. How did you two choose the program for this album? Was there any talk of more music than this, less? How did you settle on the final program?
Well, I think this element of the ballad, of the storytelling aspect, that was something that ties that program together at the core. Because interestingly enough, also the Kissing Sonata at some point was called Sonata Ballad. Then later it was changed to just sonata, but it follows the same sort of tradition, and you can really feel that when you hear the music. There is a certain a certain common ground. Of course, all of these composers are highly individual in what they make of it, but there is this sense of the long lines and the storytelling. I'm not sure. I can't remember. Maybe you remember, Roland, if there was talk about other things. I think it was that it slowly came together into the shape that it ended up having. But
I don't know if we ever did. We start to discuss firstly the Prokofiev ballad, because I mean the title became Ballads, of course, but I don't remember. Also
I
because
think that's something that I wanted to do, because I knew of the piece, but I didn't know it very well, and it wasn't played much. So
it's
so
very rarely played. I mean, I have
Yes.
never heard it myself in a concert ever by anyone, and also it's a tough piece. It's a very dense. The composition is very dense. The piano is constantly in use. It's playing all over the piano all the time. The texture is a bit like his second piano concerto. It's very dense, a lot of information, many notes all the time, and very heavy. And on top of it, the cello part, which is also very dramatic in a way. Yeah, I love the piece. It's a wonderful piece.
It's so wonderful. And I also think that, and I mean that in the best sense possible, that it's not as polished as, for example, the sonata, but I think that's what makes it great. That there are, some of the edges are a little bit rough, and you feel that, of course, he was still looking for many things, but already the genius is there. The building of the lines, also harmonically, is so interesting. And really was, it's great fun to play, and it was wonderful to explore that together.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. All right. So we're nearing, but not yet at, the end of our time together, and we actually do have a listener question now. So the person going by the screen name Schumann de la Mancha, which is an interesting combination, finds that your recording of the Shostakovich is very unified. And since we've been talking about narrative and sort of storytelling in Prokofiev, Schumann is asking, how do you approach that sort of narrative or storytelling approach in Shostakovich, where the mood, the texture, the melody can change sort of surprisingly and suddenly?
Gabriel?
You want to? Well, I mean, of course, especially speaking of this sonata now, the Shostakovich sonata, it has different challenges, and it's true that while certain aspects of these long lyrical lines are similar, that you have to be at the ready to switch from one sort of playing into the next. I find that, especially when I think of the beginning in the first movement, it's the challenge is to have a texture that is, in a sense, mellow without losing the details, because that can easily happen. And so, yeah, I think it's probably also in the piano must feel differently, I imagine, this kind of the kind of voicing, how he places the chords, but I'm not sure.
I remember us trying. I think this was maybe the only occasion where we really did some experiment with tempi, because for the other piece we were quite convinced about the overall tempi for each piece, but for the first movement in Shostakovich, I remember us really trying things that we didn't maybe believe in first. We try to do because it's an allegro and first movement, so usually you hear it quite swift and quite fast, but we deliberately try to have a bit slower tempo, just to have the some kind of elegy of this wonderful theme in the beginning, to have a kind of sadness in it all, so it doesn't get like a ordinary formal first movement sonata. So I think we really tried that, and it worked quite fine, because its tempo is really moderato. We are not playing very fast.
Yeah, because then that gives you more space to actually experience the texture, and also provides a bit more contrast for what comes after.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's true. I remember that experiment, which went well in the end.
Yeah, well, I think all of your experimentation ultimately led to something wonderful. If we're talking about the finished product here, this album, Russian Ballads, out last week, 2 weeks ago, I think, on Naxos, and certainly available anywhere you can stream music, anywhere you can buy physical copies of music. Archive Music is one place, right? It's available worldwide at this point. So at this point, so that user, thanks you for your responses. What is next for each of you? Opening out onto this time when we are perhaps not thinking about Corona restrictions quite as much as once before. What comes next? Either of you can start.
Roland, please.
What comes really next, in a few days, I will have a mixed recital and chamber music concert here in Stockholm, and also a bit later after Christmas I will play the Scriabin piano concerto with the Swedish Radio Orchestra, which I'm looking forward to very much. And before that, also another Mozart number 22, also here in Sweden. So there's a bit of everything. And since it's been like an anniversary of Scriabin, I have also been doing an old Scriabin recital a few weeks ago. That's a composer that was very intensely with me when I was very young. I was touring with all the Scriabin sonatas and so on, but now I came back to it a bit. So that's the nearest things happening now.
Wonderful.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we're all very glad that we're back to playing concerts. So that is really, it's great to be able to have these experiences again. In terms of what's coming next, different things, recitals. Of course, I do a lot of teaching also these days, so that is something that that also takes up part of my schedule. What I'm particularly always excited to do is, for example, the last recording that I released before this was Elgar Concerto, but bridge cello concerto, which is rarely played. So this is coming up now also, which I'm glad to do here with an orchestra in Germany. And whenever there is an opportunity to present pieces that may not be so widely known, as we also did in our recording here, I think it's first of all great for me personally, because I also through these projects get to explore pieces more in depth that may not be so familiar to me. And then if we can contribute even the slightest bit in making things a bit more known that are worth being heard, then I think that's a good thing to do.
All right. Well, thank you so much for bringing music that is well-known, less well-known, in any case, wonderfully played to the world. The album is Russian Ballads, music of Prokofiev, Shostakovich, and Kissin. The performers are Gabriel Schwabe and Roland Pöntinen. The hour is late for them, at least, over in continental Europe. And so it's time to wrap up our Naxos Live Q&A. Thank you so much to everyone who attended. And thank you, of course, to Gabriel and Roland for talking with us for 66 minutes at this point. So we begin with music, we intercut with music along the way, and we always like to end with music. So let's, for the final bit of music here, hear a little bit of that Prokofiev Ballad in C minor that gives the album its name. Thanks again, you two. Good luck in your next ventures, and go find the album now. This is a bit of Prokofiev.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for having us.